All right, today we're going to go a little bit deeper and look at some different types of diagrams that show energy capture and flow through an ecosystem. Here is our learning target. I can analyze diagrams illustrating energy capture and flow through an ecosystem by explaining the information shown within different types of diagrams. All right, so there's numerous diagrams that can show that. And we've seen pyramids of energy. This is the one that you're familiar with. You're probably also familiar with food chains and food webs, but we're going to be looking at some other pyramids today that you might not be so familiar with. Okay, so now here's the thing. All of these diagrams are going to be affected by the efficiency with which primary producers capture energy and turn it into chemical energy available to higher trophic levels. And this is something that we talked about yesterday, so that plays a role in what we're going to be learning about today. All right, we're going to start off pretty simply here with food chains. And you've seen these before. These are just showing the movement of energy and nutrients from one trophic level to the next. And we can simply see, right, we're starting off with the primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and finally our quaternary consumer, also known as the apex predator. All right, food webs are a little more complex, and in some cases a lot more complex, because in a food web you're putting together all of the food chains that can possibly be found in any ecosystem. Right, we've talked a lot about soil. Here we see a soil food web, and obviously it's always going to start off with our photosynthesizers. Okay, we have decomposers, mutualists, pathogens, parasites, root feeders in our second trophic level. All kinds of crazy stuff going on here. Right, shredders, predators, grazers in our third trophic level. Fourth trophic level, higher level predators. Okay, and then finally more higher level predators. And all of these things, right, live in the soil. Okay, and some of them burrow in the soil and some dig through the soil, right? So these are our higher level predators here. Okay, so these guys actually dig through the soil and pull up all of these other little members of this food chain. So this is pretty complex, but it can get even more complex as we're about to see. Here's one of the favorite ecosystems that the Discovery Channel shows, right? The African savanna. And this is pretty complex. There's a lot of interactions happening here, lots of different kinds of food chains. We see a lot of tertiary consumers here. I'm wondering if anybody can tell who is the apex predator. All right, it's the lion. Okay, here's our apex predator. All right, so I've shown two terrestrial food webs. It's only fair that we show a marine food web. And this food web is pretty complex, but there's sort of something that kind of stands out here. And this food web has sort of highlighted that. You have this particular species, there's a lot of arrows coming from that species going to other species. And this particular ecosystem relies on this one species. This is what's called a keystone species, and we're going to come back to this idea later. All right, but this food web is similar to any terrestrial food web, right? We have our primary producers down here, okay? And you've got lots of different primary consumers and secondary consumers, and it's not that different. We're going to see that when you look at biomass, marine food webs can actually be quite different from terrestrial food webs. Food food chains and food webs have an advantage in that they show how complex some of the interactions within an ecosystem can get. And there are some ecosystems out there that are very biodiverse, and there's a lot of different feeding levels and a lot of interactions. But if we want to look at how much energy is actually flowing from one trophic level to the next, we need to use a pyramid of energy flow. And we've seen this before. We know that 10% of the energy goes from one trophic level to the next, and that 90% of the energy is lost with each transfer. That's a lot of loss. But really, we're following the second law of thermodynamics here. And ecosystems can't break the law, just like anything else in nature. All right, so there's less chemical energy for higher trophic levels. And we can best see that by looking at a pyramid, right? Pyramids are bigger at the bottom, right? So that shows us that there's more energy at this level and less energy at this level. And this is showing, right, the 10% rule, right, going from one trophic level to the next, right? And I like this diagram a lot because it's showing pretty much everything, and I really like that they've included the decomposers over here, and the fact that everything is going to eventually die and decay and decompose. So this is a really great diagram. All right, there's other types of pyramids that can show us some different kinds of information. A pyramid of numbers is actually really interesting if you want to look at the census of different species within an ecosystem. And what that does is it gives you the total number of each organism within a trophic level. And for certain studies, that's actually something that you want. Another great type of pyramid is a pyramid of biomass. And what biologists do is they actually take the organisms within each trophic level and they'll dry it out. Okay, they take away all the water, and then they look at the dry weight of organic matter within a given trophic level, and that can give you a lot of information. Okay, so pyramids of numbers can often be deceiving if you're really trying to figure out energy flow, right? If we look over here, we have a really small number of trees. There's only one tree, right? But there could be thousands of caterpillars on that one tree, and maybe there's 50 birds living in that tree, right? And then maybe we have one predator, right? But this doesn't really tell the whole story when it comes to energy. Let's go over here and look at the biomass, right? Now, when you look at this, right, this follows the pyramid of energy, and you can see that the oak tree has far more biomass than the caterpillars, the blue tits, or the sparrowhawks have. So sometimes this can give you a little bit more information than this can, right? But these are going to be used in different ways by ecologists, and sometimes you need a census, and that can be useful as well. As I said before, aquatic ecosystems don't always follow the rules when it comes to pyramids, and pyramids of biomass in aquatic ecosystems can often be inverted. Really what this is telling us is that biomass actually really is dependent upon reproductive potential and longevity. And let's just get a look at that. All right, so, over time, you are going to have more producers because these guys reproduce super fast. So it's not that you don't have a lot of producers. If you were to look at this over time, you would have the same shape as a terrestrial ecosystem, right? It's just that these guys reproduce and die off and are eaten really quickly, and then they're reproducing a lot, okay? These guys are slower reproducers, and these guys are even slower reproducers. So in a marine ecosystem, you actually have more biomass at this level, right? But that doesn't mean that over time, this wasn't more biomass. Producers have these boom and bust types of reproductive rates in the oceans, and if you were to really look at that over time and weigh all of that, it would look the same as a terrestrial ecosystem. But I think this is really interesting. If anybody wants to do their project on marine ecosystems, right, you're going to have an interesting looking pyramid. All right, that brings us to our final idea for the day. Like we saw in those aquatic ecosystems, some ecosystems are producing more plant matter, or in the case of a marine ecosystem, phytoplankton, faster than others do. And that's going to have an effect on both the gross primary productivity and the net primary productivity. And this is just like gross pay and net pay. So let's break that down. Gross primary productivity is the rate at which an ecosystem's producers convert solar energy to chemical energy and biomass. But that doesn't tell you the whole story. This really does, because net primary productivity subtracts out the rate at which producers use energy for their own aerobic respiration. Don't forget, plants also have to make ATP. So they're going to use the energy that they're storing at some point. So you have to subtract out the amount of energy that producers themselves are using, right? And that gives you the net primary productivity, and that's the amount of energy that's going to go to the next trophic level. Let's take a look at the ecosystems and how they differ in their net primary productivity. All right, so let's look at terrestrial ecosystems first. And we can see here, swamps and marshes, right, they win. They are producing a lot of biomass. There's a lot of net primary productivity, right? They've got, right, they're warm. They've got all of the nutrients that they need. They've got really tight nutrient cycling. They've got a lot of water. They've got lots of sunlight. Okay? And these are the ecosystems that produced fossil fuels in the Carboniferous era, right? So they are incredibly productive, right? Second down on the list are tropical rainforests. So this should come as no surprise to us. All right, and then we have temperate forests. These are the forests that are in upstate New York, right? All you have to do is take a walk through the Adirondacks and the woods there, and you'll see quite a lot going on. All right, let's go to aquatic ecosystems. Check it out, people. Look at this. Estuaries. Lots and lots of net primary productivity. Let's not forget, the Hudson River is an estuary, right? Where that fresh water is meeting the salt water. And remember, when you look at the Hudson River, it looks dirty, but that's not dirt. That's plankton, okay? That's algae growing in the water, and it makes the Hudson River sort of look greenish or sort of a brown color. But if you remember, that's really coming from all of that algae and plankton that are growing in the water, okay? So estuaries are actually the most productive of the aquatic ecosystems. And that concludes our lecture portion of today's lesson. You guys are going to practice these ideas, and you're going to be choosing the right diagram for the type of information you want to show. Good luck.